Right now, it's 3 in the morning and I'm sitting in my truck outside my wife's parents' house. Can't sleep, keep touching my ribs where the bruises are still fresh. My son is inside, safe, sleeping in a proper bed for the first time in 3 days. That's all that matters. But I keep replaying it in my head. How close we came, how if I'd been 30 seconds slower, my boy would be gone. Let me tell you how it started. I've been working my farm for about 5 years. Nothing big, just a small operation out in the woods. We had maybe 20 chickens, half a dozen goats, a couple pigs, enough to get by, you know. My wife handled the garden and helped with the animals. Our son was 6 years old and he loved feeding the chickens every morning. That was his favorite part of the day. The property backed up to thick forest. Our nearest neighbor was about 2 miles down the road. Most days we wouldn't see another soul. It was peaceful, hard work, but peaceful. The kind of life where you fall into bed exhausted every night and wake up ready to do it all again. We weren't rich by any means. The farm barely made enough to cover expenses most months, but it was ours. We'd scraped together everything we had to buy that land. My wife grew up in the city, and I think her parents thought we were crazy moving out to the middle of nowhere. But she loved it as much as I did. At least she did back then. The forest behind our property was dense, old growth trees, thick underbrush. Sometimes you'd hear animals moving around at night. Deer mostly, maybe a fox or two. That was normal, expected even. You live on the edge of the woods, you're going to have wildlife. The house itself was small but sturdy, built in the 70s by the previous owner. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen, and living room. The front door opened into a small entryway with a wall shelf where we kept keys and mail. Nothing fancy, but it was home. About a year before we left, we started having problems with the chickens. At first, I figured it was foxes or coyotes. You expect to lose a few birds here and there when you're farming. It's just part of it. But the losses started adding up faster than they should have. I reinforced the coop, added better latches, stronger wire mesh on the windows, even put up motion sensor lights. For a week or 2, everything seemed fine. Then we lost 3 chickens in one night. The thing is, the coop door was still latched. Whatever got in had bent the door frame, just pushed it in like it was nothing. The metal latch was broken clean off, twisted at an angle that didn't make sense. I stood there that morning looking at it, trying to figure out what could do that. A bear, maybe? But we didn't have bears in that area, at least no one had seen one in decades. I bought heavier duty latches, reinforced the frame with extra lumber, told myself it was just a one-time thing. Some animal got lucky. 3 days later, I woke up to find one of the fence posts around the chicken coop knocked completely over, not broken, knocked over. Like something massive had just pushed through without even slowing down. The post was thick wood set 2 feet into the ground in concrete. It would have taken serious force to move it. That's when I started staying up nights. I'd sit in the living room with my rifle across my lap, watching out the window. My wife thought I was being paranoid. She'd try to get me to come to bed, tell me I needed sleep. But the losses were adding up. Every chicken we lost was money we couldn't afford to lose. Some nights I'd do patrols around the property with a flashlight, walk the perimeter, check the coops, make sure everything was secure. Never saw anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching from the tree line. Things got stranger about 2 months before we left. I was working in the far field one afternoon, probably 100 yards from the house. It was late summer, hot, the kind of heat that makes everything shimmer. I kept getting this feeling, you know the one, like someone's watching you, that prickle on the back of your neck. I looked up toward the tree line and saw something standing between 2 trees. At first I thought it was a person, had to be, right? Maybe a hunter who'd wandered onto my property. It was too far away to make out clearly, but it was tall, really tall, taller than anyone I'd ever seen. I waved my arm and shouted, told whoever it was that this was private property. The figure didn't move, just stood there. Something about it made my stomach turn. The proportions weren't quite right. The arms seemed too long, the shoulders too broad. I started walking toward it to get a better look. As I got closer, it turned and disappeared into the woods. Not walking exactly. It was there, and then it wasn't, like it had just melted back into the shadows between the trees. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the spot where it had been. Told myself it was just a trick of the light, or maybe someone playing around. But I couldn't shake the feeling for the rest of the day. That night, I told my wife about it. She suggested it was probably just a hunter or hiker who got lost. But I knew every hunter in the area, small community, everyone knows everyone, and nobody dressed like that. Nobody was that tall. Over the next few days, I kept seeing it, always at a distance, always at the edge of the woods, sometimes in the morning when I was doing chores, sometimes at dusk when I was finishing up for the day, always in the same general area, like it was studying the property, like it was studying us. I started keeping the rifle with me even during the day. My wife noticed I was jumpy, asked what was wrong. I told her about the figure, how I kept seeing it. She was concerned, tried to rationalize it. Maybe a homeless person camping in the woods, she said. Maybe someone who needed help. But I couldn't shake how tall it was, how it moved, the way it would just stand there, perfectly still, watching. I stopped letting my son play in the far field, kept him closer to the house. He didn't understand why, kept asking if he could go feed the chickens by himself like he used to. I had to tell him no, had to walk with him every time. He thought I was being mean. I was just trying to keep him safe. About a week after I first saw the figure, things started happening at night, sounds I'd never heard before. The first time, it was maybe 1 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard this vocalization from the woods. Not a howl exactly, more like a whoop. Long and loud, echoing across the property. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. I sat up, fully awake now, waited, heard it again, but from a different location. Like whatever was making the sound had moved 100 yards in seconds. My wife came out of the bedroom, asked what that noise was. I told her I didn't know. Maybe an owl, I said, but I'd never heard an owl make a sound like that. Over the next few nights, the sounds became more frequent. Sometimes whoops, sometimes wood knocking, like someone hitting trees with a branch. Always at night, always from different locations around the property, like whatever was out there was circling us. One night I counted the knocking sounds. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. A pattern, too deliberate to be random, too organized to be just an animal hitting trees. I started recording the sounds on my phone, thought maybe I could take them to someone who knew about wildlife, figure out what was making them. But when I played them back in the daylight, they sounded even stranger, unnatural. My wife got upset when she heard them, asked me to delete the recordings, said they gave her nightmares. The sounds continued almost every night. Sometimes they'd wake my son. He'd come padding into our room, scared, asking about the noises outside. We'd tell him it was just animals, just the forest settling down for the night. But I could see the fear in his eyes. Kids know when their parents are lying. About 3 weeks before we left, everything changed. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the goats screaming, not bleating, screaming. If you've never heard a goat scream in terror, I hope you never do. It's a sound that goes right through you. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and ran outside. My wife woke up asking what was happening. I told her to stay inside. Lock the door. Don't come out until I came back. The goat pen was on the north side of the property, maybe 50 yards from the house. I ran across the yard, the flashlight beam bouncing everywhere. Got to the pen and shined the light around. The fence was torn apart, not cut, torn. The wooden posts were snapped like toothpicks. 2 of the goats were gone. The other 4 were huddled in the corner, shaking. Their eyes were wild with fear. I swept the flashlight around the area and found tracks in the mud. Huge tracks, barefoot prints but massive. At least 18 inches long, not bear tracks. These had 5 toes like a human, but way too big. The depth of the impressions told me whatever made them was incredibly heavy. I followed the tracks to the tree line with my flashlight. At the edge of the woods, I found clumps of dark hair caught on a low branch. Thick, coarse, black hair. Nothing like any animal I knew. I heard something moving deeper in the forest, heavy footfalls getting farther away. Whatever it was big. Each step made a sound I could feel in my chest. I stood there with my rifle raised, aiming into the darkness. But whatever it was had already gone, taking our goats with it. I walked back to the pen and studied the damage by flashlight. The wooden posts were snapped clean through. It would take incredible strength to do that. I'd built that fence myself. Used treated lumber, set the posts deep. And something had just torn through it like tissue paper. I walked back to the house. My wife was waiting up, standing in the doorway with the porch light on. Our son was still asleep, thank God. I didn't want him to see this. I told her what I found, the tracks, the hair, the broken fence. She was scared now, really scared. I could see it in her eyes. Neither of us slept the rest of that night. We sat in the living room, me with my rifle, her with a kitchen knife, just waiting for sunrise. When morning came, I went back out to examine everything in daylight. The damage looked even worse. The tracks led into the woods, disappearing about 50 yards in. I took pictures with my phone, measured the footprints, 18.5 inches, 5 toes, deep impressions in the mud. I called the local ranger station, figured they should know, figured they might have some idea what could do this. The ranger came out that afternoon. Older guy, been working the area for decades. I'd seen him around town a few times. He had that weathered look people get from spending most of their life outdoors. I walked him through everything, showed him the tracks, the torn fence, the hair I'd collected in a plastic bag. His face went pale when he saw the tracks. Actually pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He asked if I'd seen what did this. I told him about the dark figure I'd been seeing at the tree line for the past few weeks, described how tall it was, how it moved. The ranger was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked if we could talk privately, away from the house. I could see my wife watching from the kitchen window. We walked over to my truck. The ranger spoke low, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. He said I needed to listen carefully, that my family and I needed to leave. Pack up and go. Don't make noise about it. Don't tell the neighbors what I saw. Just leave. I was stunned, asked him what he meant. He said there are things in these woods that the department doesn't talk about publicly. They'd tried to hunt it before, put down traps, organized hunting parties, but the thing always vanished. It had incredible intelligence, expert at navigating the forest, knew the territory better than any human ever could. He said it hunts smaller prey, things it can carry, goats, chickens, pigs. Won't go after a cow because they're too heavy to drag back into the forest. That's probably why it targeted my farm. I only had small livestock. He told me the thing that had been watching my property wouldn't stop, and I couldn't fight it. I asked if it was a bear. He shook his head. He said it was something else, something they didn't have a name for. Some of the old-timers called it different things. Most people knew it as Bigfoot. But what mattered was I couldn't kill it, and I couldn't scare it off. He said they had had 3 other families leave this area over the past 15 years because of it. Same pattern every time. Livestock disappearing, fences torn apart. Something watching from the woods. He said it was more than just a predator. It was smart. And once it decided it wanted something on my property, it would keep coming back, keep pushing, keep taking. I argued that I couldn't just leave. This was my livelihood, my home. Everything we had was tied up in this place. The ranger put his hand on my shoulder, said he was telling me this as someone who'd seen what happens when people try to stay. The lucky ones just lose all their animals. The unlucky ones. He trailed off, wouldn't finish the sentence. He told me to think about my family, especially my son. That made my blood run cold. The way he said it, like there was a specific reason to worry about a child. The ranger left, said he'd file a report about wildlife damage, but that was all he could do officially. I stood there in my driveway watching his truck disappear down the road, feeling sick to my stomach. That night at dinner, my wife could tell something was wrong. After we put our son to bed, I told her what the ranger said. Everything, about the other families, about how we needed to leave. She was terrified, wanted to pack up and go right then. But I explained we couldn't. Where would we go? We had almost nothing in savings. This farm was our whole life. If we abandoned it, we'd have nothing. We'd be starting over from scratch with no money, no plan, nowhere to live. We argued quietly, trying not to wake our son. She understood the practical reality. I could see it in her face, but she was scared, really scared. Her hands were shaking. We agreed to give it a few more days, maybe fortify the property better, install more lights, stronger locks, see if it stayed away. Maybe the ranger was being overly cautious. Maybe it would move on now that it had taken the goats. The next day, I spent every hour reinforcing everything I could think of. New locks on every door and window, stronger fences, more motion lights around the property. I even set up a bell system, string running from the coops to the house, so if anything disturbed them at night, we'd hear it. My wife helped. We worked together, barely talking. Both of us knowing deep down that it probably wouldn't matter, but we had to try, we had to do something. I installed deadbolts on both the front and back doors, triple-checked every window latch, put up additional fencing around the remaining livestock with reinforced posts. I worked until my hands were blistered and my back ached. That night, my wife fell asleep on the couch around 9. She was exhausted. I carried her to bed, checked on my son. He was sound asleep, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. I sat in the living room with my rifle across my lap, watching out the window. Every shadow seemed threatening, every sound made me jump. The house creaked and settled, and each time I thought something was trying to get in. Around 11, I heard the wood knocking again, closer this time. 3 knocks from what sounded like the edge of our property. I held my breath, waiting. 2 knocks from a different direction, then 3 more. It was still out there, still circling. The ranger was right. 2 weeks after the ranger's visit, we lost one of the pigs. I went out in the morning to feed them and found the pen gate torn off its hinges, not opened, torn off. The metal hinges were bent at impossible angles, the wood frame splintered. 1 pig was gone, the other was huddled in the corner of the pen, shaking. It wouldn't come out, wouldn't eat, just stayed there, traumatized. I found tracks again, same as before, those massive barefoot prints deep in the mud. But this time there was something else, drag marks, like something heavy had been pulled across the ground toward the woods. I followed the trail. The drag marks went about 30 yards into the forest, then disappeared. No blood, no remains, just gone. That pig weighed close to 200 pounds. Whatever took it had carried it into the woods like it was nothing. I spent the whole morning reinforcing the remaining pen, used steel cables, heavy-duty locks, built it like I was trying to keep out a tank. But even as I worked, I knew it wouldn't matter. If something could tear off metal hinges and carry a 200-pound pig into the forest, a lock wasn't going to stop it. My wife watched from the kitchen window. When I came inside, she said we needed to talk about leaving. I told her we'd figure something out. give it a few more days, maybe call my cousin in the city, see if we could stay with him for a bit while we sorted things out. But I could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't sleeping. None of us were sleeping anymore. That night, I made phone calls, reached out to family, to friends, testing the waters, seeing who might let us crash for a while. My pride fought against it, admitting we'd failed, admitting we couldn't make it work. But the alternative was worse. About 10 days before the final attack, the figure started coming closer. I was working in the garden one afternoon, pulling weeds. My son was playing nearby with his toy trucks. My wife was hanging laundry on the line. Normal day, peaceful. Then my son stopped playing, just froze, staring at the tree line. I looked up, saw him pointing. There it was, standing at the edge of the woods, but closer than before. Maybe 50 yards away, close enough that I could make out details. It was massive, had to be over 8 feet tall, broad shoulders, arms that hung down past its knees, covered in dark hair, almost black. The face was flat, pushed in with a heavy brow. And it was watching my son. I yelled for my wife to take him inside. She saw it too, grabbed our son and ran for the house. I stood there with my shovel, like that would do any good against something that size. The creature didn't move, just stood there, watching me now instead of my son. We stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds, felt like an hour. Then it turned and walked back into the trees. Casual, unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. That night, my wife said we had to leave tomorrow, pack up and go. I still argued about the money, about having nowhere to go. But my heart wasn't in it anymore. I'd seen how it looked at my son. The next morning, I called my wife's parents, swallowed my pride, asked if we could stay with him for a while. They heard the desperation in my voice, said yes immediately, asked what was wrong. I told them we'd explain when we got there. We started packing, essential items first, clothes, documents, photos. My wife moved through the house with purpose now. She had a plan. We had an escape route. I told myself we just needed to hold out for a few more days, get everything organized, then we'd be gone. 2 days after the closer encounter, something tried to look into our house. It was around midnight. I was in the living room, couldn't sleep as usual. My wife and son were in bed. I was sitting there in the dark, just watching the shadows outside. I heard a sound from the side of the house. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. I got up slowly, rifle in hand, moved toward the window, stayed back from it, out of sight. The footsteps stopped right outside. I could hear breathing. Deep, slow breathing. Then I saw it. A dark shape blocking the window. Something tall enough that it had to bend down to look in. I couldn't see details, just a silhouette. But I could feel eyes on me, watching. I stood there frozen, didn't know what to do. If I turned on the light, it would know I'd seen it. If I shot through the window, I might miss, might just make it angry. The shape stayed there for maybe 2 minutes. Then it moved. I heard the footsteps again, walking around the house, going toward the back. I followed along inside, keeping pace. Heard it stop at the bedroom window, my wife's and my bedroom, then at my son's window. It was checking all the windows, like it was looking for a way in, or looking for something specific. Finally, I heard it walk away, back toward the woods. The footsteps faded. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, just sat in my son's room with my rifle, watching his window. In the morning, I found handprints on the glass, huge handprints. The fingers were massive, thick. The palm was maybe 10 inches wide. I took pictures, then scrubbed them off before my son could see them. Didn't want to scare him more than he already was. But my wife saw them first. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me with this expression, exhausted, terrified, done. That was the day we started seriously packing. Over those last few days, I started to understand what was happening. This thing wasn't just randomly attacking livestock. It was testing us, learning about us. I found more tracks around the property, always in different spots, like it was patrolling, circling. Sometimes the tracks would come right up to the house, then back away. One morning, I found tracks leading to the chicken coop. The creature had walked right up to it, stood there for a while based on how the ground was disturbed, then walked away without taking anything, just looking, studying. Another day, I found where it had been standing in the tree line for what must have been hours. There was a depression in the leaves where something heavy had stood, branches broken at about 8 feet high where it had pushed them aside for a better view. It was watching the house, watching our routines, learning when we went to bed, when we woke up, when my son played outside. The wood knocking at night got closer. Sometimes it would be right at the edge of the property. 3 knocks, pause, waiting for a response. When none came, it would move to a different location and knock again. My wife asked what it wanted. I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to have suspicions. The way it watched my son, the way it checked his window specifically, the way the ranger had told me to think about my family, especially my boy. I didn't share these thoughts with my wife, didn't want to terrify her more. But I started sleeping in my son's room, told him it was because I wanted to be close to him. Really, I was guarding him. My son thought it was fun at first, like camping. But after the first night, when he saw me sitting up in the dark with the rifle across my lap, he started asking questions. Why was I staying in his room? What was I watching for? Was something out there? I told him I was just being careful. That sometimes animals came around at night and I wanted to make sure they didn't bother us. He accepted that, but I could see the worry in his eyes, 6 years old and already learning that the world wasn't safe. Those last few days blur together now. We were barely functioning, barely sleeping. Jumping at every sound. My wife packed during the day, essential items first, clothes, documents, photos. She moved through the house like a ghost, wouldn't even look out the windows anymore. My son knew something was wrong. He stopped asking to play outside, started having trouble sleeping, would wake up crying from nightmares he couldn't remember. I kept doing patrols at night, but my heart wasn't in it. What was I going to do if I actually came face to face with that thing? Shoot it? The ranger said you couldn't kill it. And even if I could, what if I just wounded it? What if I made it angry? The sounds at night got worse, closer, more frequent. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps right outside the house, heavy breathing, scratching sounds on the walls. One night I heard it on the roof. The whole house creaked under the weight. I sat there in the living room, looking up at the ceiling, hearing something massive moving around up there. Heard it walk from one end to the other. Then silence. Then footsteps again, like it was pacing, thinking. My wife came out of the bedroom. She'd heard it too. We sat together on the couch, holding hands, listening to something walk around on our roof, not saying anything. What was there to say? After maybe 10 minutes, it climbed down. I heard scraping sounds on the side of the house, then heavy footfalls walking away into the woods. The next morning, I found scratches on the roof shingles, deep gouges like from claws or thick fingernails. Some of the shingles were pulled loose. I didn't tell my wife, just made a note to fix them later, knowing I never would. We'd planned to leave in 3 days, had a place lined up at my wife's parents' house. We could stay there until we figured things out. Just 3 more days and we'd be gone. We didn't make it 3 days. That final night started like all the others had for the past week. I tucked my son into bed around 8, read him a story, checked under his bed and in his closet like I've been doing every night. He clutched his stuffed bear and asked if the animals would stay away tonight. I told him yes, told him Daddy would make sure of it. I kissed his forehead and left the room, pulling the door mostly closed but leaving it cracked. The hallway light stayed on, always stayed on now. My wife was already in bed, exhausted from packing all day. I told her to try to sleep, that I'd keep watch like always. I went to the living room and settled into my usual spot by the window, rifle across my lap, flashlight on the side table. The motion sensor lights were all active outside. Every door was locked, every window secured. Around 10, I heard the first wood knock. Far off, maybe at the back edge of the property. I tensed, waiting. 3 knocks, then silence. The night dragged on. I fought to stay awake. My body wanted sleep so badly. I'd been running on maybe 3 hours a night for the past week. But I couldn't let my guard down. Not now. Not when we were so close to leaving. Around midnight, I let myself relax just a little. Maybe it wouldn't come tonight. Maybe it sensed we were leaving. Maybe it had moved on. That's when I heard a noise from outside, not loud, just a soft thump from the direction of the chicken coop. I stood up immediately, adrenaline spiking, grabbed my rifle and flashlight, moved to the front door. I paused there, listening. The chickens were making nervous sounds, but nothing seemed obviously disturbed. Could have just been a fox. Could have been nothing. I unlocked the deadbolt as quietly as I could, opened the door slowly, trying not to make any sound. The night air was cool. The motion lights near the chicken coop hadn't triggered, which was a good sign. I stepped out onto the porch, leaving the door open behind me. I walked toward the chicken coop, rifle ready, flashlight sweeping the area. The chickens were definitely agitated, but I didn't see anything wrong. I checked the latch on the coop door, still secure, shined my flashlight around the perimeter. No tracks, no disturbance. Must have been nothing. Maybe one of the chickens had knocked something over inside the coop. I started to turn back toward the house. That's when I heard my son's voice. "Daddy, look! A standing bear." My blood turned to ice. I spun around and saw him standing in the yard, maybe 20 feet from the front door. He was in his pajamas and bare feet, pointing toward the tree line. His stuffed bear was clutched in his other hand. He must have woken up, must have seen I wasn't in his room, must have gotten scared and come looking for me. And when he saw the front door open, he'd just wandered outside thinking I was right there. I followed his pointing finger and saw it. About 30 yards away, at the edge of the property where the grass met the woods. Massive, easily 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, standing completely upright. Not like a bear, like a person. And it was moving toward my son, slow, deliberate steps, not running, just walking, like it had all the time in the world, like it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear each step, boom, 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 each one shaking the ground slightly. My son was still pointing. Didn't understand the danger. He thought it was just an animal to look at, something interesting, something to show Daddy. I started running, screaming at my son to get inside, running as fast as I'd ever run in my life, the rifle forgotten in one hand. The flashlight dropped somewhere behind me. None of that mattered. Only my son mattered. My son finally realized something was wrong from my tone, started to turn toward the house, but he was confused, scared by how I was yelling. He froze, not sure what to do. I was sprinting across the yard. The creature's pace didn't change, still just walking, but it was covering ground fast. Its legs were so long, each step was like 3 of mine. 20 yards to my son. The creature was maybe 25 yards from him, closing fast. 15 yards. I could see my son's face now, see the confusion turning to fear. 10 yards. The creature was so close. Too close. I reached my son and grabbed him roughly by the arm. He cried out, startled. I shoved him toward the house, my hand on his back, propelling him forward. "Run!" I screamed. He stumbled, then started running. I turned to follow. The creature was right there, closer than I thought possible. It must have covered the last 15 yards in seconds. I saw its face for the first time up close. Not quite human, not quite ape. Eyes that reflected the porch light like an animal's. Deep set, intelligent, angry. It reached out with a massive arm, hand bigger than my head, fingers like tree branches. I felt more than saw the hand coming at me. Threw myself sideways. The hand caught me in the ribs. Pain exploded through my side, like being hit with a baseball bat swung by someone twice my size. I stumbled but kept my feet. Twisted away from the grab, threw myself through the doorway. My son was already inside, crying, terrified. I could hear my wife screaming from the bedroom, woken by the commotion. The creature's hand hit the door frame as I passed through. Wood splintered. The whole frame shook. I could hear it outside, that huffing, snorting sound I'd heard before. I slammed the door shut, threw the deadbolt, grabbed the wall shelf next to the door and ripped it down. Mail and keys scattered everywhere. I shoved the shelf against the door, wedging it under the handle. It wouldn't hold. I knew it wouldn't hold. But I needed time. The creature hit the door. The whole wall shook. The shelf rattled but held. Another impact. The door frame cracked. My wife appeared in the hallway in her nightgown, saw me holding the shelf in place, saw our son crying on the floor, started screaming. "Get him!" I yelled. "Back door! Get to the truck!" She stood frozen, staring at the door as it shook with another impact. "Now!" I screamed. She snapped out of it, grabbed our son, picked him up even though he was getting too big to carry easily, started running toward the back of the house. Another impact. The door frame splintered more. I could see the door starting to separate from the frame. One more hit and it would give way. I let go of the shelf and ran after my wife and son. Behind me, I heard the door give way with a tremendous crash. The sound of wood splitting, the shelf clattering to the floor, then heavy footsteps in the entryway. I risked a glance back as I hit the kitchen, saw it ducking through the doorway. Too tall for the frame, shoulders so broad it had to turn sideways. The smell hit me, musky, rotten, overwhelming. Made my eyes water, made my stomach turn. The creature straightened up once it was through. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. In the dim light from the living room lamp, I could see it clearly. Dark fur covering a body that was too massive, too muscular. The face caught the light, those eyes looking at me, through me. It took a step forward. The floor creaked under its weight. Another step. It wasn't rushing, wasn't charging, just walking. Confident, like it knew I couldn't stop it. I backed away, moving toward the kitchen, toward my family. The creature's head turned, following my movement. Then it took another step. I heard my wife and son at the back door, heard her fumbling with the lock. My son was crying, asking what was happening, asking where the bear man was going. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, fast. Inhumanly fast. Its lips pulled back and I saw teeth. Big teeth. It made a sound, not quite a growl, something between a grunt and a roar. Then it started moving faster, not running, but faster than before. Coming toward the kitchen, coming toward the sound of my son's voice. I turned and ran. I burst through the kitchen doorway, chairs and table between me and it. I heard the creature plow through the obstacles, wood splintering, furniture crashing. My wife had the back door open. She ran out with our son. I was right behind them. We burst out into the night. The truck was parked about 30 yards away on the side of the house. My wife was running, carrying our son who was too big to carry. She was struggling, slowing down. I looked back at the house. The creature filled the back doorway, silhouetted against the kitchen light. It stopped there for a moment, just stood there. watching us run. Then it started walking out the door, across the yard, after us. "Faster!" I screamed at my wife. She was crying, gasping for breath, holding our son tight. He was screaming now, absolute terror in his voice. We reached the truck. I pulled out my keys with shaking hands, almost dropped them, got them in the lock, opened the passenger door. My wife shoved our son inside, then climbed in after him. I slammed the door shut and ran around to the driver's side. The creature was halfway across the yard now, still just walking. Those long, deliberate strides. I got the driver's door open, threw myself inside, jammed the key in the ignition, started the truck. The creature stopped, just stood there in the yard, watching us. I threw the truck into reverse, backed up fast. The headlights swept across the yard as we turned. The creature was walking again, toward the house, back the way it had come. I watched in the rearview mirror as it ducked through the back doorway, disappeared inside. Then I saw it again through the side window of the house, moving through the kitchen, into the hallway, going toward the bedrooms, going toward my son's room. The realization hit me like ice water. It was looking for him. It knew that's where he slept. It was checking to see if he was still there. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My son was sobbing in my wife's arms. She was crying silently, holding him tight, rocking back and forth. I hit the gas. The truck lurched backward down the driveway, tires spitting gravel. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The creature was standing in the doorway of my son's bedroom, silhouetted against the nightlight we'd left on, just standing there, looking at the empty bed. Then we were down the driveway onto the road, and I couldn't see the house anymore. I drove, didn't look back. My wife didn't speak. My son cried himself out after about an hour, then fell asleep in her arms. The pain in my ribs was intense. Every breath hurt, but I kept driving, put distance between us and that place, between us and that thing. We drove all night. I drove all night, didn't stop except once for gas about 2 hours in. My wife stayed in the truck with our son while I filled up. I kept watching the tree line around the gas station, expecting to see something standing there, watching. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. My ribs were on fire. Whatever the creature had hit me with, it had done damage. Each breath was agony. But it didn't matter. The pain was nothing compared to what I kept seeing when I closed my eyes. That arm reaching for my son, the creature standing in his bedroom doorway. How close we'd come. My wife stared out the window for most of the drive. Didn't speak, just held our son and stared. I wanted to say something, wanted to tell her we were safe now, but I couldn't find the words. And I wasn't sure they'd be true anyway. My son slept fitfully, would wake up whimpering, look around in panic, then settle when he saw his mother holding him, then drift back to sleep. We arrived at my in-laws' house around 4 a.m. The porch light was on. They always left it on. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a moment, engine running. We were 4 hours away from the farm, 4 hours away from those woods. It wasn't far enough, would never be far enough. My wife opened her door and got out carrying our son. He was half asleep, confused. I got out on my side, moving carefully. My ribs screamed with every movement. My mother-in-law opened the door before we could knock. She was in her bathrobe, shocked to see us. Her expression went from surprise to alarm when she saw our faces. My wife broke down, just completely broke down, fell into her mother's arms and sobbed. My mother-in-law held her, looking at me with questions in her eyes. I just shook my head. Not now, couldn't talk about it now. My father-in-law appeared behind his wife. He took one look at us and stepped aside, letting us in. My mother-in-law led my wife to the couch. My father-in-law took our son from my wife's arms. The boy was crying now, frightened by his mother's state. I stood in their entryway, feeling the weight of the last few hours crash down on me. My father-in-law walked over with my son, who reached for me. I took him, holding him close despite the pain in my ribs. "You're okay," I whispered to him. "You're okay now." But I wasn't sure any of us would ever be okay again. We spent the next few days at my in-laws' house in a daze, trying to explain what happened without sounding insane. My in-laws kept suggesting it was a bear, or maybe I'd been stressed. The farm was a lot of work. Maybe we'd both been tired seeing things, but my son had seen it too. And 6-year-olds don't hallucinate the same thing as their parents. My ribs were bruised badly, purple and black across my entire right side. Hurt to breathe, hurt to move. My mother-in-law wanted me to go to the hospital. I refused, didn't want to explain how I got injured, didn't want anyone asking questions. My wife barely spoke for the first 3 days, would just sit on the couch, staring at nothing. Her mother tried to get her to eat, to rest. She'd take a few bites of food, then push the plate away. My son clung to both of us constantly, wouldn't let either of us out of his sight. Cried if we left the room, started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done in over 2 years. After about a week, my father-in-law pulled me aside, said he wanted to drive back to the farm with me during the day, get our things, the important stuff we'd left behind. Papers, more clothes, family photos. I told my wife we were going. She grabbed my arm, eyes wide with panic, made me promise to be back before dark, made me swear I wouldn't go anywhere near those woods. I promised. The drive back felt like going to a funeral. My father-in-law tried to make conversation, asked about what we'd do next, about finding jobs in the city. I couldn't focus on his words, just watched the trees pass by, getting denser as we got closer. When we pulled up to the property, the front door was still hanging open, broken, the frame splintered where the creature had forced its way through. We went inside carefully. I had my rifle. My father-in-law had borrowed a shotgun from a friend. The house was a disaster. The shelf by the door was in pieces, kitchen chairs broken, the table pushed across the room. We moved through quickly, gathering what we could. Clothes from the bedroom, important papers from the desk in the living room, a few valuables. Then we went to my son's room. The door was open. I'd left it cracked, but now it was pushed all the way open. The room was destroyed. The mattress was torn apart, stuffing everywhere. Toys scattered across the floor, his books thrown around. The closet door ripped off its hinges, scratches on the walls, deep gouges in the wood, like something had been searching frantically, tearing the room apart, looking for something, looking for him. My father-in-law stood in the doorway, speechless. He'd seen the damage throughout the house, but this was different. This was focused, deliberate. He couldn't explain it away as a break-in anymore. "What the hell was here?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer, just gathered what few of my son's belongings were still intact. His favorite stuffed bear had survived, wedged under the bed. Some clothes, a photo album. We left quickly after that, didn't stick around to get more. Loaded the truck and drove away. I looked in the rearview mirror as we left, seeing the broken house getting smaller, seeing the dark line of trees beyond it. I never went back. A few months later, I filed for abandonment of the property, let the bank have it. Couldn't pay the mortgage from 4 hours away anyway. Couldn't sell it. Who would buy it? How could I sell it to some family knowing what was out there? I heard later that the house burned down, cause unknown. Sometimes I wonder if the ranger had something to do with that. Erasing evidence, making sure no one else moved in, making sure no other family would go through what we did. My son has nightmares sometimes, wakes up crying about the bear man. We tell him it was just a bad dream. But I can see in his eyes that he knows better. He remembers. The first few months were the hardest. We were staying in my in-laws' basement, all 3 of us in one room. My son wouldn't sleep alone. Had to be between me and my wife every night. Even then, he'd wake up screaming. My wife started seeing a therapist. Never told the therapist the real reason we left the farm. Just said there was an incident that scared us, that we'd lost everything and were starting over. The therapist prescribed medication for anxiety. My wife takes it every day. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Who would believe me? My father-in-law kept asking what really happened that night, why we'd left so suddenly, why we'd abandoned everything. I stuck to the story about a break-in, said we'd been robbed, that it wasn't safe anymore. He didn't buy it, but he stopped asking after he saw my son's room that day. The first time I took my son to a park, he refused to go near the trees, just sat on a bench with my wife while the other kids played. When I asked him why he didn't want to play, he pointed at the tree line and said, "What if the bear man is in there?" My wife and I looked at each other, didn't know what to say. Now he'll play at parks, but only the ones in the middle of the city. Wide open spaces, no woods anywhere nearby. He's 7 now, and he still checks his closet before bed, still makes me look under his bed, still asks me to leave the hall light on. My wife and I don't talk about it much anymore. But sometimes late at night when we can't sleep, we lie there in the dark, and I know we're both thinking about it, both reliving that night. She wakes up sometimes thinking she hears the wood knocking. Takes her a few minutes to remember we're in the city now. We're safe. There's no forest nearby. I work construction now, hard physical work that leaves me exhausted. I prefer it that way. Too tired to think, too tired to remember. We rent a small house in town, 2 bedrooms, tiny yard. The landlord wanted to plant trees along the fence line for privacy. I talked him out of it, offered to build a taller fence instead. He thought I was weird, but agreed. Money's tight, but we manage. No farm, no animals, no woods. My wife got a job at a grocery store. Between us, we make enough to get by. My son asks sometimes why we don't have chickens anymore, why we don't live on the farm. I tell him we're city people now. Tell him his mom wanted to be closer to her grandparents. Make up excuses about how the farm was too much work. But he knows the real reason. My wife knows the real reason. We can never live anywhere remote again. Can never have my son playing in a yard that backs up to trees. Can never be that far from other people. About 6 months after we left, I started trying to find answers. I couldn't let it go. Needed to understand what we'd encountered. I spent hours online reading every account I could find. Bigfoot sightings, Sasquatch encounters. Most of them sounded fake. Attention seekers, people wanting their 15 minutes of fame. But some of them rang true. The details were too similar to what I'd experienced. The way it moved, the sounds it made, the intelligence behind its actions, the way it targeted children specifically. I found accounts from other families who'd fled their homes. Most of them didn't go into detail, just mentioned moving suddenly, losing everything, not feeling safe anymore. Reading between the lines, I could tell. They'd seen it too. I found a forum where people shared their experiences, made an anonymous account, never posted anything. Just read hundreds of stories. Some were clearly fake, but others were just like mine. One guy in Northern California lost his daughter for 3 hours, found her in the woods, unharmed, but she wouldn't speak for 2 weeks after. When she finally talked, she said a big, hairy man had taken her to a cave, wanted to keep her. She'd only escaped because it went to get food and she ran. Another family in Oregon. Their 5-year-old son disappeared from their backyard, found his pajamas torn up at the edge of their property. Never found the boy. That was 12 years ago. I stopped reading after that one, couldn't handle it, kept thinking about my son, how close we'd come, how if he'd been in his bed that night, if he hadn't followed me outside by accident. My wife caught me on the computer one night reading about it. She got angry, said I needed to stop, that I was making it worse, that we'd escaped and we needed to move on. She was right. I deleted my account, stopped searching, but I still think about it, still wonder about the families who didn't get out in time. Some people think Bigfoot is a myth, a legend, something fun to talk about around a campfire. Maybe a guy in a costume, maybe mass hallucination. I know better now. It's real, and it's out there. After everything I've read, everything I've learned, I understand now that we were lucky. Lucky the ranger came to warn us. Lucky we had somewhere to go. Lucky my son followed me outside that night instead of staying in his bed where the creature would have found him. Lucky I'd been watching. Lucky I'd heard the sound and gone outside when I did. Because if I'd been asleep, if we'd all been asleep when it broke in, I don't let myself think about that. The ranger was right about everything. Once it decides it wants something, whether that's your livestock or your child, it won't stop. You can't fight it. You can't reason with it. You can't scare it away. I understand now that it was escalating, testing our defenses, learning our patterns, getting bolder, working its way up to taking what it really wanted. My son, I don't know why it targets children specifically. Maybe they're easier to carry. Maybe they smell different. Maybe there's some instinct we don't understand. But the pattern is clear when you look at all the accounts together. It watches families, studies them, and when it makes its move, it goes for the kids. We had maybe one more night before it would have broken in while we were sleeping. I'm certain of that now. All those nights of testing our windows, walking on the roof, checking our defenses, it was planning, waiting for the right moment. That night when my son came outside, that wasn't the plan. The creature wasn't ready yet, but it saw an opportunity and it took it. If I'd been 30 seconds slower, if I'd taken time to put on boots or find my flashlight properly, if I'd hesitated at all, my son would be gone. I touch my bruised ribs sometimes. Even now, almost a year later, I can still feel where it hit me. The bruises faded after a few weeks, but there's a tender spot that never quite went away. A permanent reminder of how close we came. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, at the old property, waiting for someone else to move in. I hope not. I hope it moved on, went back deeper into the forest where there are no farms, no families, no children. But I don't think it did. I think it's still there. Still watching the road, still waiting. I lost everything we'd built. Our home, our livelihood, our dream of living off the land, our sense of safety. But we still have each other, and we still have our son. That's all that matters. Because I know what would have happened if we'd stayed one more night, if my son had been in his bed when that thing came looking for him, if it had found him before I could get there. Every time my son climbs into bed at night, safe in our little rental house in town, far from any woods, I thank God we got out when we did. And I never ever stop checking the locks on the doors. For more interesting stories, check this out.